Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and in today's video, I'm revisiting a project that's never worked well for me in the past. I'm going to be dyeing the Soom little gem I got to make Kid Rune so that his kid self will match his older self. I'm kind of having flashbacks to how badly my previous experiences with dye have gone. It took multiple attempts to get Rillen's lizard parts dyed, and Rune was a whole mess that ended up requiring a lot of revision and sanding, and he still needs airbrushing to even him out. But like with many things, I also believe that practice is what will make the biggest difference, and I'd love to be able to dye dolls with confidence in the future. So even though my previous experiences didn't go well, I figured it was wise to continue to try, even if trying makes me nervous. I'm using the same formula I used when I dyed Rune, Big Rune I guess since this is also Rune, and that's going to get confusing, but it's 1 teaspoon of chocolate brown and 1 teaspoon of apricot orange Rit dye more in my pot of water, with about a teaspoon of dish soap added, as the dye's instructions recommend. I'm using a steel pot on an induction burner so the temperature is at a steady but low boil, and I have a pot of clean water handy to rinse pieces as I finish them. Both of these are pots I use specifically for dye and other doll projects, so they're not something that ever comes in contact with food. In preparation of dyeing this doll, which is brand new and has never been handled or sealed, I scrubbed the doll with dish soap and a magic eraser to remove any possible oil or mold release left from the doll being cast. Then I wiped down each part with rubbing alcohol to ensure it was completely clean. I tested dip times on the first piece and found that about 45 seconds gave me a good match for the piece I was comparing them to, so I use a timer on my phone to dip each piece of the doll that long. I have 2 hands, so I try to do 2 pieces at once, since he's a pretty small doll. But even then, it's still a long process and kind of boring, even if I'm nervous the whole time. When projects go wrong, especially after multiple tries, it's easy to become discouraged and feel like it might not be a good option for a skill you should add to your toolbox. But continuing to repeat a process, even when you never have a good outcome, allows you to try new things and find new ways to iron out problems that'll increase your odds of having better results later on. This is really only my 4th time dyeing a doll, and that's not all that many times to try something. I didn't stop after my 4th time sewing something bad, so why would I quit because the dye didn't work? So while a good number of pieces did turn out really nicely, I noticed a lot of pieces, especially the chest and torso, ended up having some very noticeable marbling in some places. This was pretty disappointing, but I've also experimented enough at this point with previous projects to have a rough idea of what I could try to fix it. So I kept the dye pot boiling and grabbed a bottle of acetone to remove the dye I had just put on. Since the discoloration wasn't as extreme as it was when I dyed Big Rune, since his was the result of sealant problems, I was able to lighten the flawed pieces of this doll enough to remove the unevenness. The dye would have kept coming off if I'd kept scrubbing, but as soon as it was light enough that the marbling was gone, I washed it with soap and water and then dipped it back into the pot to re-dye the piece. This time it was darker than it had been when it was completely undyed, so I pulled the piece back out every now and then to check the color and get a good match. Then I wiped down the other flawed pieces the same way and continued on. I couldn't get rid of some of the marbling on the bottom of the doll's feet, but that's not a place that's noticeable enough that I think it'll make a big difference. There was also some on one of the fantasy legs that I couldn't fix, but since those are going to be painted, that doesn't really matter. All the other pieces ended up smooth and beautiful after re-dyeing, and those are the ones that are going to be most visible, so they're the ones that are important. I'd say this time I had much more success. I couldn't begin to guess why the parts I cleaned all the same way could turn out with some perfect and some marbled, but it may just be that that's the nature of dyeing dolls. Either way, I'm glad to have found an easy way to fix it and get good results, and now I'm looking forward to dyeing more dolls in the future, with a little bit more confidence in tow. And that's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.